Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our Friday 11 a.m. live. I'm going to give it just a little bit for everybody to see our link and hop on, and then we'll get started with another craft today. Okay, hopefully people are finding us. Good morning. My name is Stephani Vick. I'm with Girl Scouts Carolina's Peaks to Piedmont. We serve, oh, hi Mindy. Okay, now I'm seeing some people. We serve 40 counties in western and central North Carolina. I don't know about you, but it is raining where I am today, so we're inside. Hey June. So my friend June is going to be in the comments. She's going to leave some Girl Scout information and then answer any questions you may have. And then after the video, I'll hop on and answer if you have any specific questions too. So today we are going to be doing beginner embroidery. So I'm going to give it a few more minutes to see if anybody can find us. But first, if you are interested in Girl Scouts, you can check us out at beagirlscout.org. We've got a ton of fun things happening this summer. We have virtual troops. We have badge workshops for girls that are already with us. We have summer camp, virtual summer camp coming up. You can check that out at camplikeagirl.org. So we have lots of stuff going on, and June will put those links for you in the comments. So today we are going to do beginner embroidery. I'm going to teach you six basic stitches and then show you a couple ways you can put them together into cool projects and then even make your own fun patches. Because at Girl Scouts, we love earning badges and patches. So this way you can make whatever kind of patch you want. So to learn our stitches, we are first going to use lacing cards. And that's a great way to learn some basic stitches. And also it's great for little kids to be able to just use yarn. So we have yarn and a yarn needle, which is a big plastic needle. It has a big eye, so it's I don't know if you can see it. It's good practice for how to thread a needle. And then this is just cardboard. It was some granola bars, and I punched a line of holes in it. So for our first stitch, we are going to do a running stitch, and that's just your basic straight stitch. So you cut a piece of yarn, thread your needle. One trick for threading a needle is if you put it in front of something white, it helps you kind of see that eye. So if you have a piece of paper or some white fabric, that helps you thread it. And then you tie a knot at the end. Now this knot might not actually be big enough for this hole punch, but if we were really stitching, that's what you would do. You just do a regular overhand knot at the end. So for the running stitch, you start at the bottom, you go up through the first hole, and then down through the second hole. Up through the third hole, down through the fourth hole. So this is just your basic stitch, basic straight stitch. You see how that makes kind of a dashed line? So that one's just up and down and up and down. Okay? So that's our first stitch. Our second stitch is my favorite. It's called the back stitch. So you thread another piece of yarn. And if your yarn is coming unraveled, you can always use Scotch tape at the ends too. That helps you keep your yarn so that you can get it in and out of the needle. So, like I said, the back stitch is my favorite. This is what I use for any kind of embroidery I do, pretty much. And I learned how to embroider when I was a little girl too, and I've been doing it for most of my life now. I learned from my grandma. So for this one, we're gonna go up through the second hole. So I skipped the first hole and I'm going up through the second hole. Then I go back to the first hole because this is the back stitch. Then I'll go up through the third hole and then back down through the second hole. So through the same hole where I started. I'm getting a little tangled here. Okay. So you see that? I'm going to show you again. So I'm going to go up through the next hole and then back down through the previous hole. So they're going through the same ones. So up through the next hole, down through the last hole that I did. And do you see how the running stitch was a dashed line and the back stitch makes a straight line? You see the difference? Hi, Carrie. Okay, so that's 2 stitches. That's the running stitch and the back stitch. Now we'll do 2 more that are a little more advanced. So like I said, you can practice these with your cardboard before you move on to fabric. And then you could also, even with felt, you could punch holes and make that kind of a lacing card. Okay, so our next stitch is the chain stitch. So I'm still using just 1 row of holes. I'm going to go up through the first hole. See if I can do this facing you, and then back down through the first hole. So I'm going in at the same place. But see, it makes a little loop, and I'm not going to pull it through all the way. I'm going to leave that loop there and then come up through the second hole and catch that loop. So I'm going through the loop. So then when I pull it, see what happened? So let's try that again. So now I'm up through the second hole. I'm going to go back down through the second hole. I'm not going to pull it all the way through. I'm going to leave that loop, then come up through the next hole to catch the loop. See, my needle goes through that loop, and then I pull it, and that's what holds the stitch in place. So this stitch is a lot of fun. You can do it as a chain stitch like this, or what I'm going to show you later is how to do a detached chain stitch. Once you get this basic stitch down, there's a lot of fun things you can do with it. So remember, you go back through the same hole, you don't pull the loop through all the way, bring the needle up through the loop, and then the special way that you end this is you go back down right on the other side of that loop to hold it in place. So that's a chain stitch. It makes a nice, thick, solid line. Okay? Then the last kind of long stitch like this that I'm going to show you is a really difficult one. This one's called the blanket stitch, and it is one that I have to practice all the time. So don't worry if you don't get it right away. Pretty much any time I do it, I feel like I have to really think about it and how this one works. So I've got another piece of yarn in my yarn needle, and see how I've got 2 rows of holes on this one. So the blanket stitch is a little bit different. It's going to be a wider stitch. So I'll start on this first hole. You come up through that first hole, and then you go over and down and go into that hole. And again, you don't pull it all the way through. You leave this loop. You come up right above where you went in. You catch that loop, and then you pull. See, it's kind of a funny stitch. Hey, Craig. Hey, Uncle Mac. Okay, so we'll do it again. You go over and down. You don't pull it all the way through. You keep that loop, and then you go back through right above where you just went in and pull it. And you see how you kind of get a line that goes over and down, over and down? So over and down, put that loop up, back through right above it, and pull it. The blanket stitch is a really good joining stitch. You can use it to put 2 different fabrics together. So here's the last one, and then the way that you end it is you go right back in next to that last stitch you make, and that kind of locks it in place. See that? Okay, so those are 4 stitches that you can practice. And then I've got another kind of fun one for making flowers. So this one's called a woven wheel. So the way we start this one is a wheel. So first we start with the spokes. So this yarn is pretty frayed. I'm going to see if I can get it in this needle. Okay, so for this one, I've got a hole in the middle, and then I've got kind of a circle of holes around it. So when you're doing this in fabric, you won't have the holes. You'll just kind of have to visualize where you're going. But for this one, we're going to make spokes around this center hole. So you're doing straight stitches coming out from the center and up to this outside part. You'll need an odd number of spokes. So I usually do 5, but if you want to make a really big flower, you could do 7. So see, I'm kind of making a star shape. This is the spokes of the woven wheel. So 5 spokes. So there's our wheel, and now we weave it. So you'll come back up near the center, and then we're going to weave around and around. So you're going to go over, under, over, under. So I'm going to go under this one, over that one, under the next one, over, under, over, under. You keep going around and around and around, over, under, over, under, over, under. Let's see if I can get it done quick so you can start to see what gets built. So I'd love to know in the comments, have any of you ever embroidered before or done any other sewing? It's a really great skill to have, because even though we're just talking about decorative stitches right now, a lot of these, like the running stitch and the back stitch and the blanket stitch, are joining stitches. So you can use them just in regular sewing and mending. So that's a great skill to have so that you can fix anything that gets a rip or a tear. So let me get a couple more weavings through these spokes to show you what it makes. So see, it makes a rose shape. Oops. Oh, that's my mom on there. She's embroidered but has never seen a woven wheel. This is a new one for me too. It's something that I've learned probably in the last 6 months. So that makes a rose shape. So you'll keep going around and around and around until you've covered up all your spokes. So your circle is going to be as big as however big you made the spokes. So you'll keep doing that until it's all covered up. So now I've got one more stitch to show you, and then I'm going to show you how you can put them together into projects. Hi, Carrie. Oh, wow, all the way from New York. Cool. Welcome to North Carolina. Virtually. Okay, so this last one is another one of my favorites, but it is kind of difficult. A lot of people are scared of this stitch, but I think if you just practice, you will learn to love it. So this is called a French knot. This one's a little more difficult to do in our cardboard lacing card, but we'll give it a try. So instead of using a hole punch, I used my needle so the holes weren't too big. So for the French knot, you're going to come up through the bottom, and then let's see, hopefully I can show you this. It's kind of, let me see if I can show you a little bit closer. Oops. Sorry guys, moving y'all around. Okay. So for this one, you wrap your thread around the needle 1, 2, 3. You see that? So you can do it 2 or 3 times. Probably wouldn't want to do any more than that. And then you put your needle back in right next to where it came out. So you don't want to do it in the same hole, because that'll just take, your thread will just come straight back through. But right next to where it came out, and then you pull, and hopefully it works. Let's see. Oh no, mine didn't work, so I'm gonna try again. I told you this one's difficult. So you go up, 1, 2, 3 times around the needle. Oops. You have to hold your thread kind of tight and pull through. And see, it makes a big fluffy knot. So that's a French knot. Let's try it one more time. So you go up through the bottom of your fabric. You go around your needle 1, 2, 3 times. You go back down right next to where your last stitch was. You pull it through and you get a big old French knot. Can you see how big they get? Because you've got all that wrapped around your, all that thread is wrapped around your needle. So that is 6 stitches we've learned. We've got the running stitch, the back stitch, chain stitch, blanket stitch, woven wheel, little roses, and French knots. So now what do? One of the really traditional things to do with embroidery is called a sampler. And that is a piece of art you make where you're just sampling all your stitches. So for this one, I just used a pencil to draw some straight lines and I tried all my stitches. So I used embroidery floss. This is the same kind of thread you would use to make like friendship bracelets. And did you know that embroidery floss is 6 pieces of threads put together? So sometimes you use all 6 and sometimes you divide it up. You can use 3 at a time. You could use 2 at a time, or you could use all 6. So on my sampler, what I did was the first row I did 6 and the second row I did 3. So those are both running stitch. Then I did 6 for back stitch, 3 for back stitch. So you can see how the top row is a little bit more thick. Then I did back stitch, blanket stitch, some French knots, a couple of woven wheels, and then this is what I was telling you about before. This is a detached chain stitch made into a lazy daisy. So see how each of those is just one chain stitch instead of going along in a line? You do them all from the center and that makes a flower. So once you learn your chain stitch, you can make it into a lazy daisy. That's what that's called. So you can buy embroidery patterns. I usually make my own because then they're in my own handwriting. So here's another one I've been working on for a friend. So I just wrote it all with a nice sharp pencil. They also make markers especially for this, but I can usually never find this when it's time. Okay, so if you're embroidering, you're going to want to use an embroidery hoop that holds your fabric nice and tight, so it's kind of like a drum. But if you don't have that, another great thing you can stitch on is felt, because it's already a little bit thicker and more sturdy, so you don't have to worry about it flopping around as much and stretching out of shape. So embroidering on felt is a really fun thing to do, and you can use it to make your very own patches. So once you've practiced all your stitches and made your sampler and practiced your stitches some more, you can make your own patch to put on the back of your Girl Scout vest, because it'll be a fun patch. So let me show you a couple of things that I did to make a patch. So for this one, I did an S for Stephanie. Go that way? I don't know. So I did back stitch for the S, and then lazy daisy with a French knot in the middle for some flowers. And then the back of that's pretty messy. So I cut out another piece of felt, and then I'll sew that on, and you can use a blanket stitch or a running stitch around the edge, and then you've got yourself a finished badge or patch. So what better way to commemorate learning how to embroider than with an embroidered patch that you can put on the back of your vest? So for this one, I did back stitch for the needle. I did a detached chain stitch to make the needle eye, so you can see how it's like the hole of a needle. and then I did back stitch for the thread going through, and I attached it to the backing piece with a blanket stitch. Let me show you two more I made. I made a little pig because my camp name is Piggy, so she's mostly back stitch. She's got a lazy daisy in her hair. She's got some French knot eyes, and then she's attached to the back with a running stitch. And then I made a pizza because I think I was hungry at the time. So those are just French knots. And let me show you, sometimes you want your stitching just to not show up. So that was just a yellow running stitch, putting it on the back, you can't really see. And sometimes you want your stitching to be part of the design. So I used a bright bold color and a big blanket stitch. So those are a couple ideas. One way that you can make your design is you can draw it on a piece of tissue paper, so you can use your resources wisely. Draw it on some tissue paper and then pin that onto your felt and stitch over it. So I'm making this for my daisy friend Ellie. So you stitch over it and then you very carefully rip off your tissue paper . And I'll have to go in and get some of these smaller pieces out from in the middle. But you see how it just leaves behind your stitching. You rip away that tissue paper, and that way you can make any kind of design you want, even words, which would be a little bit harder to freehand. So see, once I take out those last little pieces, I might need to get some tweezers into some of those small spots. That's how you can make your very own personalized patch. So if you guys make patches, I'd love to see pictures in the comments. I'm going to put pictures of these ones in the comments so you can get a closer look, see what kind of stitches I did, and then start practicing. Okay? So I will come back into the comments and see if you have any more specific questions about embroidery. And if you have any questions about Girl Scouts or you want to join with us, you can check out beagirlscout.org or check out our summer camps at camplikeagirl.org. Thanks for watching, everybody. Bye.